Hey guys, we're doing a how to handicap video here, and our subject is college basketball home courts. And this falls into one of many square better biases that you find out there. Now some of the other square better biases are the squares like to bet favorites. They like to bet the over. They overvalue recent results, things that just happened recently, especially the things they saw on television. And they also undervalue game stats and overvalue scores. We know that. But additionally, something that isn't as well known is they undervalue home court advantage in college basketball, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay, now there's been a lot of talk recently about how in the NFL, for example, that home field has lessened in recent years. And I think there's a valid case for that. The stadiums don't have as much fan energy, typically the newer stadiums. And the professional teams have really figured out how to travel in a way that minimizes the negativity for the traveling team. But I think college basketball still, the squares undervalue home court. And we've really seen that recently with a massive amount of big wins by home teams against some of the top 5 teams in the country have been getting beat time after time on the road. And I think that typically squares are undervaluing that home court. So let's talk about numbers. Is Marco D'Angelo, one of the most experienced cappers out there, he actually gives a full 5 points for home field, or home court in this case, in college basketball. So if you have a team at home, they're going to be -5, and on the road, they're going to be +5 against that same team. So it's 5 points for home, so it's a 10-point swing. Now actually in the forums there was a discussion where other handicappers thought that was too much. I actually tend to side with Marco on that, and I think there are some factors that make home court even more valuable in college basketball. Let's talk about that. One is fairly intuitive. Crowd intensity is certain places, and Duke is a classic example, the Cameron Crazies, is the crowd just goes nuts. And when they go nuts, it's a situation where it's a huge home court. It's so obvious, but sometimes it's undervalued. So one is, what is the crowd intensity? Number 2, is the game happening on the weekend? And Marco also talks about this. Weekend crowds usually have more energy and more intensity. Also, is the game on TV? Because if it is, it means more intensity for the crowd. And a factor that you don't hear as much about is there something going on with the academic schedule of the home school? Because if it's spring break or any Christmas break or any other time where there's going to be less people on campus, oftentimes that home field is diminished because of that. But otherwise, that's actually one where it would be diminished. That's a rare case, but you can look in and find those cases. Number 2 factor is the road team an elite traveling team? And let's look at Duke again. Though they have a great home field, Duke has Coach K, they've got a ton of money, and they've got this thing figured out. So they're going to travel more effectively than some Big West school or some lesser Pac-10 school, and you can just et cetera, with those examples. And that's something that's interesting, is you have to look at both sides of the equation. Is how much intensity is the home court going to have, and how well does the other team travel? And that's usually going to be correlated to how much money they spend and how much experience they have going into big opposing courts and intense opposing courts. So to me, the perfect example, and you see it sometimes here out west, is you've got a very fanatical, BYU's an example of this. You have a fanatical home court playing a lot of smaller teams that aren't used to going into such environments, that don't have the travel all figured out. And really, you could say the length of the travel is important, but I actually think that's sometimes overrated. Yeah, if it's all the way across the country and you're changing time zones, that really matters. But if it's 200 miles versus 600 miles, not so much. again, the question is, are they used to the intensity of where they're going? Now let's wrap this up and talk about it, or let's talk about our last concept here, which is, let's talk about a classic trap game. And again, we're using Marco's trap theory here, is when you have the better team getting a small number on the road. That is often one of the most classic traps, is people see, and we see it all the time, a team like Ohio State, who this year has been #1 a big chunk of the year, and in the top 5 almost the whole year. And then they're going to a place like Wisconsin or a place like Purdue, and all of a sudden the game's pick 'em, or even the home team's 1.5. And for the square, just put yourself in their minds. They are looking at the game and saying, I'm getting the better team and I'm getting points. And what they don't realize is just how much that home court is worth. And they also, it's something that, let's think about what a trap is. It's the bookie who's doing the trapping. And let's think about his mentality in these games for a minute. He knows that maybe the true line, which means the line that will split the result, should be, let's say, 3.5 or 3. Okay? But what he'll do is he'll know he can split the action at pick'em. If anything, maybe even at pick'em, he's going to get more of the road team. So that's a perfect spot for the bookie. He gets to have a situation where more than 50% of the people are going to be betting the better road team. And he knows that if the true line is supposed to be -3 and it's really pick'em, that road team is going to win less than 50% of the time. So you're getting 11-10 as the bookie. You know a majority of people are going to lay 11-10 in a proposition that's less than 50%. He doesn't need to make the line 3 or 3.5 for the home team. If he does, he's going to get 85 or 90% action on one side. He doesn't necessarily want that. He'd rather take 60 and have people betting the wrong side. And that's the definition of a trap. Marco's an expert at finding those. But here's one where you can literally look at game in or week in and week out, day in and day out, and say, show me superior teams, and this is objectively superior, ranked teams against unranked teams, etc., in which they are in that +2 to -2 range, and you usually are going to be getting value fading them because they're setting up a trap. Not always, but it's a great place to look to start. Okay, guys. I really enjoyed talking about this. I'm going to be doing more of these solo podcasts, and we'll be back soon. Remember, you can get all of our videos with Marco and with Vegas Runner at pregame.tv.